Hello, a great welcome to you. Now, I'm recording this because of one of my subscribers, Salaheen, has requested that I give a personal view on Kejawen philosophy. I need to emphasise that this is a personal view, and it comes from my own background and experience. So I need to give you a little bit about my actual background and experience. My mother was a Methodist, and my father an Anglo-Catholic, although of Jewish heritage. I went to a Church of England school and Sunday school, where I learned largely about the New Testament and Jesus' miracles. But my family drifted away from religion. Indeed, my mother now claims to have no beliefs. I also drifted away, but found it again as a teenager when I was christened and became an altar boy in a liberal Anglo-Catholic church. But once again I drifted into agnosticism, and more latterly was probably influenced by what I would describe as militant atheism. However, when I met my Javanese wife, who was to become my Javanese wife, in order to marry her, I really had to become a Muslim. Or if I didn't, it was even more complicated and expensive than becoming a Muslim and marrying her. Now, as an agnostic at the time, I really didn't mind. But this was actually a catalyst for me to develop my faith again. So anyway, I hope you enjoy my explanations. That's the explanation about me, but I hope you enjoy my explanation about Kejawen. Now, this is part of a new section to the magic of Java called The Real Magic of Java. In this new section, I'm going to focus on real people performing what they believe to be real magic in Java. I'll attempt to explain some of the elements of this Javanese magic, particularly what I describe as the Kejawen elements. However, I need to warn you that inevitably my explanations will be partial. Maybe sometimes some elements of what I say will be incorrect, for which I profusely apologise. But this reflects the oral tradition of magic in Java, the mystery, and at times, I have to admit, subterfuge surrounding the practice of magic in Java. Please accept my apologies, but I do hope you enjoy this new section. Now, as I say, I'm a Muslim, so I believe in one God, and this will probably surprise non-Muslims, maybe even surprise some Muslims. But I actually believe that this God that I believe in is the same God, regardless of religion. I also believe that anything takes on some sort of a form as the result of the cumulative total of belief in it. So pagan gods, Hindu gods, Babylonian gods, Iblis, which is the devil in Islam, Javanese legends, unicorns, they all have an energy about them which comes from this total of the energy that's devoted to them. But this doesn't make them gods or even our creator. So that is how I square it with belief in one God. Now, I proclaim my faith and believe that Muhammad is God's messenger, but along with many other mortals, including Abraham, and Isa, Jesus. And that is common to all Muslims. But more controversially, I also believe that Buddha is the Buddha is one of God's messengers. I pray at least 5 times a day, and I do this normally at the prescribed times for Muslims, facing towards Mecca. And I believe that praying at the same time with others, or at the same time as others, and in the same way, gives it more power. If possible, I go to a masjid or mosque to pray. But although being a Sunni Muslim, I'm more than happy to go to a Shia or a Ahmadiyya masjid. I will also, and indeed do, go to a church or temple to pray. I always give alms, zakat, which I take very seriously. I fast very seriously during Ramadan. And when I can at other times, although this doesn't always follow an Islamic tradition, I would love to, and indeed am committed to go on Hajj. But the number of people from Indonesia has become very restricted. And I don't see Umrah as the same thing at all. In fact, I see it as a part of Saudi tourism. Add to that, with the current health restrictions, I'm not sure that I'll ever be able to travel far again. Maybe I will, I don't know. Messianic Muslims, but I use that word messianic, I mean like evangelical Muslims, what in the West are called conservative Muslims. But indeed, and non-Muslims, and in fact particularly non-Muslims, will claim that my interest in magic is haram or forbidden. And indeed, there are parts of Al-Quran which support this view. But what I'd argue is this imposes a Christian Enlightenment perspective of society on Islam, in seeing the occult as not a part of the materialist world, and therefore forbidden, because Islam encourages us to explore knowledge and truth, and the occult is very much a part of this. If we're allowed to use magic, I think is much more of a moot point, as even if it's used for good, it's not submitting to Allah's will. But then the same could be asking for things in prayer. So if and how I can use magic is part of what I call my daily jihad, which means the internal battle I have between good and evil, and has nothing to do with what in the West people believe jihad is, which I suspect is a definition that comes from the Israeli Mossad, because it's certainly not my understanding of jihad. And my own daily jihad changes my view of the line between black and white magic, which itself is a construct simply used to explain this dilemma, and whether or not I can use magic in any form. But what people see as magic is not my main concern. Indeed, most magicians would describe me as armchair, somewhat derogatory, or following the psychological theory of magic. So I think even from a Western viewpoint, it's debatable whether or not you would see me as a magician. And I certainly don't see myself as a magician. I simply see myself as a Muslim, or, as you're about to hear, Kejawen. In fact, magic and my religion are completely intertwined and not a separate activity. And that's something that people struggle with incredibly in the West. And certainly it's nothing like, Gerald Gardner's view of Wicca as being a religion in its own right. I don't see it that way at all. It's absolutely entwined with my Islam, or as you're about to hear, with my Kejawen. Well, I've used the word Kejawen a few times now, and I probably ought to explain it. It's the traditional religion of Java. Now, it's not recognised by the Indonesian government as one of the official religions of Indonesia. And we all have to have an official religion which is put on our ID cards. So most adherents are like me and follow a Muslim discipline. But others may be Christian, Hindu, Buddhist. I don't think there are officially Jews in Indonesia, but there certainly are followers of Kejawen who are Jewish. Those who see themselves as following a pure Kejawen path maybe don't follow the discipline of other religions and don't pray as in other religions. So, for example, when they pray, they will often pray outside in a chair at midnight, having first showered in flowers. Kejawen debatably combines Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism and animism. Personally, I see the philosophy as largely Buddhist, but not really the same sort of Buddhism that you find in other parts of Southeast Asia. And the distinction between Buddhism and Hinduism is somewhat blurred, as indeed it is across all of Southeast Asia. But animism is also very, very important within Kejawen beliefs. Now, some Western commentators have suggested that Kejawen incorporates theosophy, which was popular amongst the Dutch colonists. And certainly you can find very strong parallels with many New Age beliefs. But I think that reflects the antecedents of Kejawen, particularly the Buddhist tradition, rather than it being to do with theosophy having been incorporated within Kejawen. But I could be very wrong about that. Now, one of the reasons why so little is known about Kejawen in the West, and indeed so little is known about Kejawen anywhere, is that it's comprised of 7 veils or levels. And each of these is an abstraction, and each of these contradicts the previous one. So I see it a little like Gödel's uncertainty principle, that everything is completely right and wrong simultaneously. So I see no problem in contradicting myself, and I often do, because I jump between these levels as a shorthand to help other people understand what I'm talking about. Now, I say I jump between these levels, but I've got to be honest with you. I don't actually know the content of each of these levels. What I do understand is that the lower levels would include what is called magic, and the higher levels would probably be close to a oneness with God. So why does this magic exist at these lower levels, but is somewhat shunned at the higher levels? Well, I believe it's so that people can understand the wonder and majesty of God. But we need to recognise that many people are unable to escape from this veil. I suppose one way of looking at these veils and understanding the reason for them and the difficulty that people will have in not comprehending why they can't be told the truth all at once is that they progressively destroy the Enlightenment assumptions about the materialist world. So that's why many people can never move on to these higher veils, especially if they're well educated, because they are very much rooted to the Enlightenment's assumptions, very much rooted to the materialist world and can't get their heads around anything that is outside of this materialist world. Now, I talked about my daily jihad, which, as I say, is very different to the conception of what it's about in the West. And that's my understanding of the line between good and evil. But it's an internal good and evil on a daily basis. So we don't externalise good and evil. We believe that good and evil is internal to us. And that is our daily struggle, which is the meaning of the word jihad. So the same can be said about the line between black and white magic, albeit that I believe that the distinction itself to be somewhat illusory. But if you want me to give you a definition, I suppose black magic is about imposing your will on others. Now, given that I have a very liberal view of what magic is and actually includes the evil eye, this has major implications. Indeed, you could see my tarot readings on this channel, and indeed the channel itself as influencing others. So a daily battle I have within myself is this black magic. And then what of education and mass media, which I certainly see as being black magic. Now, a simpler definition is that I've actually found God's light. This is a light that's all about love and all about bliss. In fact, I've had an experience similar, but not as strong as others report, to the Kundalini experience. But I've definitely found this light. There's no question about it in my mind. And anything that's not light is darkness. But the light can penetrate the darkness, but the darkness cannot penetrate the light. So evil and black magic are simply an absence of God. Again, this has major implications in terms of what is evil. But do I actually believe in good and evil? Well, maybe not. Maybe they're simply metaphors. But I certainly have experienced the light and the dark. And these are things that I currently play around with in my meditation. I ought to add to you that as well as praying 5 times a day, at the end of my prayers, I meditate. Not for long, but I meditate 5 times a day. And it's these types of issues that come out in my meditation. So I've already said that I definitely believe in God, the creator of everything. Now I call that being God, that being, that's the wrong thing. I call that entity, there's no way of explaining God, so I call him Allah, but I'm more than happy to call him God. Some people in Kejawen will call him J. Gusti or Gusti, but it doesn't matter what name you give it to him. But do I believe in Iblis, the devil? Not really, but I see it as a metaphor. As I've said, along with angels, jinns, demons, anything that people believe in takes on substance. So people do believe in Iblis, the devil, so it can take on substance. But it's nothing like the power of God. Now, I see time and space as simply human constructs. So the idea of the day of the resurrection is also a construct. I'm not saying that God won't judge us at some point. All I'm saying is the idea of time, and time having a linearity, is a construct. In fact, I see it as a constraint. So what of heaven and hell? Well, heaven, or Jannah, the garden of paradise as it is to us Muslims, I do believe is a metaphor. And certainly, I don't think you'll find 72 virgins in it. I do believe in levels of heaven and each bringing one closer to God. So the highest level would be a oneness with God. And the same would be true of Janaham, or hell, which again I see as a metaphor. Again, I do believe that there are levels to it, and in this case, these are levels that take us further away from God. Some Kejawen believers believe that both heaven and hell are here on earth, and I have to say I have some sympathy with this. So one of the things that I play around with is you can see people being sent back to earth as a psychopath or narcissist, because it seems to me that they're trapped in a hell of their own creation. So what about karma and reincarnation? Well, karma is the universe balancing itself. And the New Agers see this as about what you do in your life. And I'm not going to discount that. Because the universe does balance, but much more profound and having a bigger influence, largely because you don't understand it, are the debts of 7 generations of your ancestors. And I believe this is even stronger if your ancestors have used black magic. So you have a debt to pay if your ancestors have been engaged in black magic. And that debt, well, unless you can resolve the karma, will last for 7 generations. Now, often implied in karma is reincarnation. And some Kejawen believers do believe in it. And that as a punishment, we're sent back to earth, or hell if you like, as simple animals or rocks. But because I see time as a construct, I hold a slightly different view, not necessarily contradictory to this view, but if you like, a higher level of abstraction. Nevertheless, I do find the New Age or Buddhist idea that we're here to learn and to keep learning and being sent back to learn these lessons as a very useful metaphor. Now, related to the 7 veils of Kejawen, there are 7 levels or universes, and there would be different creatures living in each of these. So be they ghosts, demons, jinn, etc. An elaboration on this is that there are many universes which we move between depending on our vibration. So any major event can create a new universe. In fact, any decision we take can create a new universe. In some of these universes, we simply follow the will of others. And I see this as us actually being almost merely avatars. So in some of these universes, our will hardly exists, and we're simply following out orders or following out the wishes of others, following out predetermined roles. But when our energy and our vibration is at a high level, we co-create our universes with God. As time is simply a construct, these universes are concurrent. So therefore, when I talked earlier about ghosts being in one of the universes, what is a ghost if time is concurrent? It's just another universe with a different energy in it. So it's not so much about slipping between these universes. It's just that there is it's that they're concurrent and that we move between them, not what we believe is inside them moves between them. Now, this suggests that it's we who move, or under this version, it suggests that it's we who move between universes. So I pose the question, is this the true basis of magic? Now I need to add to this that following on from the animist tradition in Kejawen, everything is created by God, that is created by God, is seen as being conscious. They're not necessarily of the same order of consciousness, hence that we can be sent back as rocks, but yes, even rocks are conscious. So when I go into my garden or when I walk in the hills, I don't do it that well, I used to do it better as a child actually, but I attempt to communicate with animals, with nature, with what people see as inanimate objects. And I have varying degrees of success with this. I say talk, I do it through a telepathy, I suppose, is what you'd call it. And I believe that this consciousness, we co-create our reality with God. In other words, nothing is real or material. It's only that which we believe has any semblance of reality. So in other words, everything is psychological and not material. So what I'm saying is the material world that we all believe we live in and is simply an hallucination. It's not real. It's something that we're being convinced to believe is real. Reality is what we create along with God. So everything is psychological and not material. It's our beliefs that constrain what we can create. So materialist science, and in fact all human knowledge, is actually a constraint on what we can co-create. So in other words, if we don't believe in the laws of physics, then we can do things which are outside of the laws of physics. So the laws of physics are actually a constraint on what we can do, rather than about knowledge. Now, of course, the same can be said of time and space. Time and space are the biggest constraints on our thinking. Therefore, if we believe that things are possible, that they can happen. So, for example, I do occasionally practice moving within time and space. Now, this isn't, or at least for me, this isn't this sort of Hollywood version of time travel. No, it's a very mundane thing, and that I can free myself from the constraints of gravity and as a result move very quickly on this earth. So I can move through time and indeed space, not in what we consider to be human time. Now, I'm sure other people are less constrained than me and can do something closer to the Hollywood version of time travel. But it would be difficult because you have to free yourself from so much that you've learned. Therefore, if we believe things are possible, then they are possible. Again, is this the real basis of magic? But having considered this view of consciousness co-creating our reality, it leads me to another view of these universes. And it's not that there aren't many universes, but each of these universes contains just us. So we remain in our own universe, which we co-create with God, and others remain in a different one. Now, of course, we come across other people seemingly within our universe, but they remain in their universe. It's simply that we have enough in common that we can at times believe that we have shared experiences. But what we're not doing is sharing our universes. So it has the semblance, because of people can agree with one another on what they've seen and what they've done, it has the semblance that we're living in the same reality, the same universe. But if we were really to sit down and explore this, and explore the boundaries of this with people, then we'd begin to understand that we live in very different universes. So magic is about influencing the universes of others. And that would include almost everything. But again, especially mass media and education. So my view is a very psychological view, that everything is consciousness. I believe that the materialist world is just a constraint placed upon us rather than a valid description of reality, and in fact takes us further away from the truth which we should be seeking than actually bringing us closer to it. Again, anything and everything is possible, and these constraints are just the influence of our beliefs on our imagination. Now, I am a truth seeker, and my mission is to become closer to God. And I believe that, when I spoke about us being on this earth to learn, then I believe that that is actually everybody's mission. What people see as magic and the practice of what people see as magic really isn't that important to me. And part of the reason for that is I've been blessed with this light from God. Now, I'm not special. You can all be blessed by it. It takes meditation. It takes meditation in particular. I'm not going to prescribe the path to you because we all have different paths. But it is a stage in us moving closer to God. It's only a stage. I know I've got a long, long way to go. Now, I can use this light, and indeed I sometimes do, to remove the darkness from others. So to remove what people might call jinn, demons, spells, whatever, to remove them from other people, just as Parcano does. Nothing like as well, but I can do it. But I still have my own personal jihad about this, because of if I'm submitting to God, should I be using this light? Even though this light is for good, if I'm using it, am I truly submitting to the wishes of God? And I think you can take it further. And this is very much in some Buddhist traditions. And that is, if I'm using the light, because of the light won't come to you unless you start attacking your own ego. But isn't this a sort of a high level of the ego? That you're almost putting yourself on a pedestal because you're closer to God, and that you're helping people, you're such a good person. I haven't reached a conclusion on this. This is my own personal jihad. These are the things that I struggle with each day. And of course, if somebody is in need, I will help them. But I'm just struggling with how much I should do things. Just as I struggle with how much I should put on this channel. Should I be reading my tarot cards, etc.? They're all things that I consider on a very, very regular basis, because that's the nature of my jihad, and that is so very, very important to me. I've just realised that what I've just said sounds like I'm being critical of Parcano, and nothing could be further from the truth. What I'm describing is my own personal jihad and my own personal coming to terms with being blessed with this light and how I should use it. And I know that I won't be able to continue to use it if I develop ego and pride around it. So please don't see it as any form of criticism as Parcano, because he would not be able to do what he does unless he was a very, very good man indeed. And I don't want to give the impression of anything else. Well, I really hope you've enjoyed this. Because these are real events, I can't say how regularly I'm going to be adding to this subsection. Because I don't know how often they're going to occur. But I would imagine that they'll be at least every couple of months, maybe monthly. Now, if you'd like to know when that's going to be, please subscribe and hit the button, and you'll get information on when new ones are released. I'd love you to make comments and ask questions, and if you do, I'll attempt to answer them as honestly as I can. I promise you that there's no attempt on this channel, or this part of this channel, of me. There'll be no attempt by me at any type of subterfuge. I'll try to be as honest and open as I possibly can be. Inevitably, there will be some of you who disagree with my interpretation, and we can agree to disagree. But what you're seeing is real stuff here. What I'd love you to do, if you enjoyed this, is look at my other sections. Particularly, I've written novels about magic in Java, and they contain much more information in them, especially me trying to understand the theories of magic, the psychology of it, and I try and intersperse them with a sort of spiritual dimension. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, and God bless you.